My name is Erica Tomlinson, and I'm a 25-year-old man who grew up believing he was a mistake. I wish that line were poetic exaggeration, something a dramatic narrator whispers over a dimly lit montage. But in my case, it was a truth carved slowly into me by the people who were supposed to love me first. I grew up on a farm in northern Missouri. Cows, cornfields, dust roads, early mornings, long shadows. People say farm life builds tough men. Maybe it does. But nothing toughens a boy faster than being humiliated inside his own home. The world outside can be cruel, but when cruelty starts at your own dinner table, you learn to grow armor, where most kids grow innocence. When I was born, I had a large patch of vitiligo covering one side of my face, stretching from my cheekbone across my jaw. My grandmother claimed it looked like a splash of spilled milk. My father called it a blemish. My mother said it was something we'll have to explain to people. And everyone else in the family, neighbors, uncles, cousins, joined in thinking the best way to handle difference was to mock it until it became a family tradition. My older sister Marianne was the only one who didn't join in, but she didn't defend me either. She simply watched things happen in silence. And silence, I learned, can bruise just as deeply as words. My parents and grandmother, though, their mocks weren't occasional. They were relentless, dressed in humor, wrapped in "we're just joking," as if cruelty became tender when spoken with a smile. They'd compare me to the cows, saying my patchy face meant God mixed up the recipe. Sometimes my grandmother would pass me in the kitchen, glance at me, and mutter, "Should have been born a calf, that way no one would notice." I laugh now bitterly at how much those tiny lines shaped the way I breathed. At school, I was the spotted kid. At home, I was the punchline. There was nowhere to escape to except my room, and even then I'd hear them chuckle from the hallway, unaware that my heart was somewhere between cracking and dissolving. When I turned 14, I tried once to tell my mother how much the comments hurt. She smirked and said, "Erica, you're too sensitive. You'll never make it in life if you can't take a joke." And that was it. Lesson learned: never offer a tender part of yourself to people who take pride in poking it. By the time high school ended, I knew two things for certain. I needed to get out. I would never belong in that house, not the way I deserved to. So I chose a college as far away as possible, a place where my name wasn't a punchline, where no one had ever heard the jokes that raised me like ghosts. And for the first time in my life, I could breathe. College felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. No one stared at my face. No one whispered. No one asked if I'd been burned or bitten or got into something. People just talked to me, like I was normal, like I wasn't defined by the color of my skin. That's where I met Lila. It wasn't dramatic, no slow-motion hallway moment or clumsy accident involving spilled books. We were paired for a freshman literature project. She had warm hazel eyes, dark hair that curled at the ends, and a voice soft enough to coax anxiety into calming down. When she talked to me, she made eye contact, not with the unmarked side of my face, not with a flinch, not with curiosity, but with me. Just me. And the first time she called me handsome, I had to look away because I didn't know how to hold a compliment that didn't have thorns. Our friendship became something slow and real. We shared takeout on her dorm floor, studied until sunrise more times than I can count, and joked that if we ever co-wrote a novel, it would ruin literature forever. By the end of sophomore year, we were dating. And by senior year, we were building a life together. For the first time, I understood what it felt like to exist without shrinking into myself. But the universe always has a way of testing peace. It happened at my sister Marianne's wedding. I drove back home for the ceremony, hopeful, maybe foolishly, that my family would at least pretend to behave for one day. Weddings make people sentimental, right? Maybe nostalgia would make them softer for a few hours. Wrong. The reception was loud, crowded with relatives I hadn't seen in years. I kept my distance, stuck near the fringes of the barn where the celebration was held. I'd planned to tell them about Lila that weekend, how serious we had become, how I wanted her to meet them when we came back for the holidays. But then came the remark. One of my uncles nudged me playfully about being next in line for marriage. It was harmless teasing. But before I could shrug it off, my grandmother cut in, voice loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "Who's going to marry him with that face? He's lucky if someone asks him to the barn dance, let alone down the aisle." My parents laughed, actually laughed. Not awkwardly, not out of discomfort, but as if it were the funniest thing they'd heard all week. People around us shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Marianne looked away, and I froze. Not because the comment was new, God knows I'd heard it in 100 forms, but because something inside me snapped in that moment. It wasn't the insult itself, it was how familiar it felt. Like I'd been dragged back to childhood, shoved into the same suffocating mold I had worked so hard to escape. That night, I sat alone in the rental car and realized something with chilling clarity. These people would never love me. Not the way a son deserved, not the way a human deserved. And for the first time, instead of hurting, I felt done. I promised myself that after graduation, I would not return. I would build my own life, one where my face wasn't a punchline and my existence wasn't an inconvenience. What I didn't know then was that cutting them off emotionally was only the beginning. The real storm, the one that would change everything, was still waiting on the horizon. Graduation day felt like driving across a state line into a new version of myself. My cap and gown itched, the Missouri sun was brutal, and the auditorium smelled like too many families packed into one place. But Lila was there smiling at me, like I'd done something extraordinary. My parents came too. I didn't expect them to, and part of me wished they hadn't. When they stepped out of their truck, I could tell they were already uncomfortable in the city, squinting at every tall building as if they might collapse from arrogance. Introducing them to Lila was something I'll never forget. I took her hand, walked her over, and said, "Mom, Dad, this is Lila, my girlfriend." My father blinked. My mother's eyebrows shot up. My grandmother's lips tightened into a thin, judgmental line. They didn't hide their shock for even a second. My mother finally forced out, "Oh, she's very normal." Normal. As if dating me should have been some kind of charitable act. Lila squeezed my hand and kept her smile polite, but I felt the knife twist internally. I'd told her stories, every painful detail of what my childhood had been, but hearing my parents say something out loud was different. It was proof, ugly proof. We took pictures. My parents barely touched me in any of them. My grandmother refused one altogether, muttering that the sun was too bright. After the ceremony ended, we stood near their truck, and I told them what I'd been rehearsing for months. "I'm not coming back to the farm," I said. "I'm going to stay here after graduation. This is where I want my life to be." My mother stiffened. My father's jaw shifted like he was chewing invisible tobacco. "And who's supposed to take care of the farm?" he asked, voice hard. "Marianne," I said. "She already helps with everything." He snorted and let her husband run the place know. "You're part of this family, Erica. You have responsibilities." There it was. Not affection, not joy for my future, not pride. Just expectation, obligation, ownership. I swallowed. "I'm not coming back." My mother didn't argue further. She just said very quietly, "You've made a mistake," and then turned away. They drove off after a goodbye so cold it barely qualified as language. 2 years passed without anything dramatic. We exchanged occasional holiday texts, nothing more. It was peaceful in a sterile way. Lila and I built a life, a small apartment, new jobs, weekend, walks to the farmer's market, late-night talks about marriage, and forever. I finally understood what calm felt like, how silence could fill a home without carrying any cruelty inside it. Then, earlier this year, Lila proposed to me. She did it in the living room with string lights she'd hung while I was at work. She'd written, "Marry me, Erica," on the wall, using sticky notes, because she said it felt like something I would do if I wasn't terrible at craft projects. I said yes before she finished the question. The invitations went out 3 months later. We invited Marianne and her husband. We did not invite my parents or grandmother. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't spite. It was self-preservation. I didn't want the sound of their laughter, cold, cutting, always aimed at me, to echo through the happiest day of my life. I thought they'd ignore it, pretend they didn't care. I was wrong. My mother called me the moment she realized she hadn't received an invitation. Not 5 minutes later, not after sleeping on it, immediately. Her voice was sharp, shrill. "How dare you humiliate us like this, your own family, your own blood?" I calmly said I didn't want you there. "Because you think you're too good for us now," she snapped. "Too good for simple people. Too good for the farm that fed you." "No," I said, "because you made my childhood hell." She scoffed. "You're being dramatic. You were just sensitive. We never meant anything." "But you said it," I said gently, "and I lived it." I hung up. Then I blocked her number. For good measure, I blocked my father too. Satisfaction washed over me like cool water. I'd wanted to do that for years. But peace never lasts long in families like mine. 3 hours later, Marianne called. She didn't yell, didn't accuse, just sounded tired. "Erica, you need to invite them." "No, I really don't." She inhaled shakily. "You don't understand. Mom, she's been diagnosed with stage 2 lung cancer. She's not doing well. She wants to see you get married. It's her last wish." The room tilted. Cancer? Everything inside me clenched. I hated my parents, yes, but wishing illness on someone, that wasn't me. That wasn't who Lila loved. That wasn't who I wanted to be. I almost said yes, almost crumbled, almost apologized for not being the dutiful son they wanted, until Lila asked quietly from across the room, Erica, are you sure it's true? Doubt crawled into me like static. Marianne said only she, my father, and my grandmother knew. Convenient. Too convenient. I needed someone outside their circle, someone honest. So I called Aunt Serena, my mother's youngest sister, the one who'd helped me move into my first apartment, the one who'd slipped me $20 bills just because, the one who, unlike the rest of them, had never made a single joke about my face. I told her everything. The silence that followed was heavy, then fractured. Oh, Erica, she whispered, I wasn't sure if I should tell you, but I can't lie to you. My stomach twisted. Your mother isn't sick. Nothing's wrong with her. They made it up. My heartbeat roared in my ears. Why? Because they were furious you didn't invite them. Your mother said she would do whatever it took to make you respect them. She said guilt would work better than anything else. They planned to show up to the wedding, cause a scene, and make sure you never forgot it. For a moment, I said nothing. Not because I didn't understand, but because I understood too well. Every instinct inside me curled into a tight, burning knot. They had lied about cancer. Cancer. Because they wanted power. Control. Because they still thought of me as the desperate little boy they could manipulate. Aunt Serena apologized. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. Without her, I wouldn't have known the truth until it was too late. When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, staring at nothing. Lila wrapped her arms around me from behind, and I sank into her without saying a word. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I went public. I posted the truth online. Lila helped me word it kindly but clearly. I didn't want to shame them. I just wanted protection, witnesses, so they couldn't twist the narrative again. I revoked Marianne's invitation. I blocked her too. It hurt, but not as much as allowing betrayal to stand. 2 hours later, my grandmother texted me, though the number was obviously my mother using her phone. The message said, "You can post whatever you want. I will still stop this wedding. You cannot marry without my blessing." And that was the moment something inside me finally snapped. I texted back, "I wish the cancer story had been true. Then at least your cruelty would be temporary." A terrible thing to say, a thing born out of pain and exhaustion and years of wounds. She screenshot it and posted it instantly. Half the family condemned me. Half finally said publicly what they'd whispered for years, that my parents were sick people who had tormented me far too long. And I just sat there shaking, wondering how all of this had spiraled so far. I wanted peace. I wanted distance. I wanted a wedding day, not poisoned by the people who raised me. But my family, they wanted war. And I had no idea that the worst part, the part that would push everything over the edge, was still coming. I didn't sleep the night my grandmother posted that screenshot. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my chest tight and my pulse uneven, like my own body couldn't decide whether I should be angry, ashamed, or numb. Lila slept beside me, one arm draped over my waist, breathing softly. Her presence was the only thing grounding me, the only thing reminding me that I wasn't alone anymore. But my mind kept replaying the worst moments of my childhood. The words, the laughs, the looks. The screenshot she posted wasn't just a message, it was a weapon, and they knew exactly how to use it. By morning, I'd already been blocked by several relatives. Others messaged Lila privately to ask what really happened. A few cousins reached out to tell me they'd always known my parents were cruel. Some offered sympathy, some disgust at what my mother had done. But a large portion had already chosen sides. And it wasn't mine. 3 days passed, like that digital silence, digital noise, digital warfare swirling through the extended family like poison. Lila tried to pull me away from it. "Erica," she said gently one night, turning my face toward hers, "you're letting them live in your head. They don't get to do that anymore." "I know," I whispered. "I just didn't expect it to get this ugly." She brushed her thumb against my cheek, against the white patch of skin that had defined my life more than any feature should. "They're showing their true colors. Let them." I wanted to believe her. I wanted it to be that simple. But trauma doesn't grow quiet just because life has become kind. On the 4th night, Aunt Serena called again. Her voice was low. "Erica, something's happened." My stomach tightened. "What now?" "They came to my house." I stood up so fast I knocked over the remote. "Who?" "Your parents. Your grandmother. They showed up last night, bags and all." My pulse hammered. "Why your house?" "They said they were staying in a hotel." "They tried. But your grandmother threw a fit about having to sleep in a cheap place like common people. They kept pushing. I caved." I pressed my fingers to my forehead. Serena, you shouldn't have let them in. I know, she whispered. Believe me, I know. But your mother said if I didn't let them stay, she'd tell the entire family that I betrayed her. She paused. I'm tired, Erica. I'm so tired of being caught in the crossfire. I softened. Serena wasn't like them. She'd always been the only flicker of warmth in the Tomlinson family tree. It's okay, I said quietly. I don't blame you. She exhaled shakily. They're planning something. They keep talking in circles, whispering. I think they're going to try to show up at the wedding. My chest constricted. Of course they were. Of course they couldn't leave me alone, not even here, not even now, not even when all I wanted was peace. They said Serena continued that if you wouldn't do the right thing, they would handle it themselves, whatever that means. I already knew what it meant. Humiliation, a scene, chaos, a final attempt to break me in front of people I loved. It was the same pattern from my childhood control through embarrassment, cruelty disguised as teaching him a lesson. Except now I was grown, and they were losing grip. They were clawing. What should I do? Serena whispered. I didn't answer right away. Outside the window, the streetlights blurred. Through the humid night, a car drove by its headlights, slicing across the room. Lila stepped out of the kitchen, watching me quietly, her concern written on her face. I made a decision then, a decision I'd been avoiding for years. I'm coming over, I said. We're ending this. The drive to Serena's house was silent. My hands were tight on the steering wheel. Lila sat beside me, fingers lightly resting on mine, anchoring me. Are you sure you're ready? She asked softly. No, I said honestly. But if I keep avoiding them, they'll never stop. She nodded once, and that was enough. When we pulled up to Serena's house, I could see the tension through the windows. Shapes moving, voices rising and falling, shadows pacing. Serena opened the door before I even knocked. She looked exhausted, hair messy, eyes red. They're in the living room, she whispered. They don't know you're coming. Good, I said. I stepped inside. My mother was sitting on the couch, arms crossed. My father stood near the window, jaw clenched. My grandmother was perched like a gargoyle in the armchair, wearing an expression that had haunted my childhood. When they saw me, the room froze. My mother's face twisted in shock. Then accusation. You, she hissed. So Serena did tell you. My grandmother turned on her. I told you she shouldn't have been trusted. Serena flinched. I lifted a hand. Enough. This isn't about her. This is about me. And you. My mother rose to her feet. You think you can talk to us like that, after everything we've done for you? I felt something inside me snap the final thread of restraint. Everything you've done for me, I said slowly. Like what? Mocking me since the day I could understand words, turning my face into a family joke, teaching me that I was unlovable before I could even spell the word. My father stepped forward. Watch your tone. No, I straightened. For once in my life, you're going to listen. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. My voice was quiet, steady. And that made it worse for them. You made my childhood miserable, I said. I spent years thinking I was broken, thinking I deserved every laugh, every comment. You never defended me. You never held me when I cried. You never even pretended to love me, not without conditions. My mother scoffed. We gave you a home. You gave me a roof, I corrected. Not a home, and certainly not a family. My grandmother leaned forward, eyes sharp. Ungrateful boy. We raised you. You raised a shield I cut in. You raised someone who learned to disappear just to survive. The room went utterly still. My mother's nostrils flared. What do you want? Erica. An apology. No, I said. I want you to leave me alone, for good. Do not come to my wedding. Do not show up at the hotel. Do not contact me again. If you do, I'll call the police. You wouldn't dare, my father growled. I've dared to leave before, I said. I'll dare again if it means protecting the life I'm building. The silence that followed felt like an earthquake. And then I turned away and walked out. I didn't wait for their reaction. I didn't look back. If I had, maybe I would have faltered. Outside, the night air hit me like a wave. My chest cracked open, and everything I'd been holding in for years finally spilled out. Lila wrapped her arms around me as I broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, painfully, like something long caged had finally been released. I didn't cry because they hurt me. I cried because I was finally letting them go. Later, Serena texted me. They're gone. I told them to leave. I should have said it years ago. I thanked her, and for the first time in my life, I felt something close to peace. But the story wasn't over. The wedding was days away, and even though my parents had been confronted, I still didn't trust them. I didn't trust silence, because sometimes silence is the loudest threat of all. The days before the wedding felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, beautiful on the horizon, but with something dangerous humming beneath my feet. I tried to focus on final details, confirming table settings, taste testing desserts, double-checking Lila's floral choices. But every quiet moment left too much room for anxiety to seep in. What if they tried something? What if my parents showed up anyway? What if everything spiraled right when my life was supposed to begin? Lila saw it all over my face. She didn't pressure me to talk, didn't try to fix it with empty words. She simply stayed beside me, warm and steady. When I tightened up, she'd place a hand on my chest and whisper, "Breathe, Erica. You're safe." And I'd breathe even when safety felt like a fragile illusion. 2 days before the ceremony, I heard a car pull up outside our apartment. Then, hurried footsteps. A sharp knock. When I opened the door, Aunt Serena stood there, breathless, flustered, and visibly terrified of something. "They're back," she said. My heart dropped. "What do you mean?" "My mother, your grandmother, and your parents. They came back to my house this morning. They brought luggage again. They said the hotel was too expensive and that I was obligated to host them because I'm family." She rubbed her forehead, ashamed. "I tried to refuse, I really did. But they cornered me. They insulted me, guilted me, told me I was abandoning them in their time of need. Erica, I don't know how to fight them anymore." I'd never seen Serena look so defeated. It twisted something deep in my chest. They weren't only damaging me, they were ripping through anyone soft-hearted enough to care. Lila stepped beside me, gripping my hand gently. "It's okay, Serena. You did the best you could." My aunt shook her head. I should have shut the door. "But now they're in my house planning something. Your grandmother keeps saying they're going to handle things at the wedding. I don't know what that means, but it sounds bad." She looked at me desperately, eyes glossy. "You need to confront them before they show up at your ceremony and ruin everything." Part of me wanted to collapse. Part of me wanted to scream. But the deepest part of me, the part that grew up learning to survive, knew she was right. I nodded once. "Okay, we'll go together." Serena looked relieved and terrified all at once. Lila squeezed my arm. "I'm coming too." I shook my head. "No, you don't need to see this." Her eyes softened, but she didn't push. "I'll wait here, but call me as soon as it's over, no matter how it goes." I kissed her forehead, grabbed my keys, and followed Serena to the car. The drive to her house was a blur of road lines and simmering dread. The sun hung low, bathing the world in that burnt orange glow that makes everything feel like it's happening underwater. Serena parked in her driveway, but neither of us moved. "You don't have to go in," I said gently. She shook her head. "I do. They'll be angrier if I don't. And honestly, I need to see you stand up to them. I never could." Her voice cracked. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "This ends today, I promised." Inside, the air felt heavier than usual, like it had absorbed every negative word in the room. My parents and grandmother were in the living room, mid-argument. My mother spun around first, eyes blazing. "Of course," she sneered. "Serena betrayed us again." Grandmother slapped her palm against her armrest. "I told you she's weak. We should have gone straight to the hotel ourselves." My father scoffed, staring at me with disappointment so rehearsed it looked bored. Well, look who finally decided to show up. I didn't raise my voice, didn't slam the door, didn't match their chaos. I simply stepped inside and said calmly, "This is going to stop. Today." My grandmother barked a laugh. "Stop! You think you can order your elders around." "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to draw a boundary, and you will listen to it." My mother crossed her arms. "You ungrateful child." I held up a hand. "For once in your life, let me finish a sentence." That shut her up. Barely. I took a breath. My hands trembled, but my voice remained steady. "I don't want you at my wedding. I don't want you in my life. I don't want contact of any kind." My father rolled his eyes. "You're acting like a child, Erica." "No," I said. "Acting like a child was letting you treat me like garbage for 20 years. Acting like an adult is choosing peace over blood." My grandmother scoffed again. "Peace. You think marrying that city girl will give you peace? You'll be back crying to us when it all falls apart." I stared at her. I'd rather crawl over broken glass than come back to this family. Serena flinched. My grandmother's face twisted in offense. My father muttered something under his breath. But my mother, the one whose words always cut deepest, stepped closer. "You think you're so righteous because you escaped the farm," she spat. "Because you went to college. Because you found a woman who pities you." "She doesn't pity me," I said. "She loves me. She doesn't know the real you. She knows more than you ever bothered to." Her jaw tightened. "We raised you." "No," I said. "You raised a child you didn't like, then punished him for it." I didn't realize tears had filled my eyes until my vision blurred. "You made me believe I was unlovable," I whispered. "You mocked me for something I was born with. You let people laugh at me. You joined in. And now you want access to the happiest day of my life, so you can ruin it too. Silence swallowed the room. I won't let you, I said finally. If you come near the ceremony, even the hotel, I will call security. I will call the police. I'm not your scared little boy anymore. My father stepped forward. You wouldn't dare. I looked him straight in the eyes. Try me. My grandmother muttered, he's lost his mind. No, I said quietly. I have found it. My mother stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Not the patch on my face, not the flaw she'd mocked since I could walk, but a man, and she hated it. You'll regret this, she whispered. No, I said. I regret every year I spent trying to earn a love you never intended to give. The words hung between us like smoke. I turned to Serena. Let's go. My mother lunged forward. Erica! I stepped back. The stop was sharp, instinctual. No, I said firmly. We're done. And then I walked out. As I stepped onto the porch, the weight broke. For the first time, I sobbed. Not dramatic movie cries, quiet, shaking years of pressure dissolving behind my ribs. Serena wrapped her arms around me, holding me the way a mother should have long ago. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. I cried harder. When I finally pulled away, my face ached. My lungs felt scraped raw, but my heart felt like it had been cracked open and filled with light. I left their house with something I'd never had before. Closure. Not peace, they'd taken too much of that for too long. But closure. And a certainty so solid it felt like armor. They would not ruin the best day of my life. Not anymore. Not ever again. The morning of the wedding felt impossibly still. Not calm, not quiet, but still as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see whether the past would find a way to claw into the present. I woke up before sunrise, not from nerves, but from the unfamiliar sensation of nothing. No anxiety, no dread, no fear of footsteps outside my door. After the confrontation at Serena's house, something inside me had finally shut the last door my parents ever held open. Lila was asleep beside me in her silk robe, one hand sprawled across my pillow, hair draped across her cheek like ink on parchment. She looked peaceful, dreaming, untouched by the storm that had shaken every corner of my past. I leaned down and kissed her temple. She stirred, smiled, and whispered, "Good morning, almost husband." For the first time in weeks, I laughed. We got ready separately, as tradition or superstition suggests. Before leaving for the hotel venue, I checked my phone one last time. No threats, no messages, no frantic calls from Serena, no cryptic rants leaked through extended family. Just quiet. And I didn't trust it. The venue was a sunlit ballroom in a historic hotel overlooking the river. Golden ceilings, crystal chandeliers walls, washed in soft ivory tones. It wasn't extravagant, it was warm, intimate, everything I'd never had growing up. Our wedding coordinator, Kira, approached with a clipboard. Everything's running smoothly, Erica. Guests are arriving. Lila's getting final touches in the bridal suite. Any unexpected visitors? I asked, gently hoping it sounded casual. She raised an eyebrow. Security is tight, just like you requested. So unless your relatives suddenly develop teleportation, we're good. I exhaled slowly. Right. Everything might actually be okay. As I paced the hallway, taking deep breaths, I saw Serena step off the elevator. She looked radiant in a navy dress exhaustion replaced with pride. When her eyes met mine, they softened. They're gone, she said, without me even asking. They checked out of the hotel near my house early yesterday morning. Didn't tell anyone where they were going, but... She hesitated. I don't think they came here. A knot in my chest loosened. You did the right thing, she added gently. I know it hurt, but you did the right thing. I swallowed hard and hugged her. Thank you for everything. She held me tightly. You deserve happiness, Erica. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. The ceremony felt like stepping into a movie I never believed I'd get to star in. Guests rose when I walked down the aisle, but I didn't look at them. I couldn't. My eyes fixed on the doors at the back on the path Lila would walk down to reach me. I waited with my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The quartet played softly. Everyone hushed. Then the doors opened, and Lila walked in. For a moment, everything else dissolved. Her dress was simple, elegant, flowing like soft water. Her hair fell in loose curls that glowed in the golden light. She smiled at me, just me, with a look that held more love than anything I had ever known. My throat tightened. When she reached me, she took my shaking hands in hers and whispered, I'm yours, completely. The officiant spoke. People smiled. The river shimmered outside like it was blessing us. We exchanged vows we wrote ourselves. Lila's voice trembled as she said, Erica, you are the most gentle man I've ever known. Not because life has been kind to you, but because you chose to be kind in spite of it. I swallowed hard. When it was my turn, my voice cracked. Lila, you taught me what it feels like to be seen, not the surface of me, not the parts I was mocked for, but the person beneath. You saved me, and I will spend the rest of my life loving you the way you deserve. She cried, I cried, everyone cried. We kissed. The room erupted in applause. For once in my life, the love around me was real. The reception blurred into warmth, laughter, clinking glasses, soft music, dancing under cascading lights. No disruptions, no shadows in doorways, no sudden chaos. It was everything I had prayed for. During dinner, Marianne walked hesitantly to our table. She looked smaller than I remembered, nervous, gripping her clutch like a lifeline. Erica, she whispered. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I let them pressure me. I should have stood up to them. I didn't. And I'm so sorry. For a moment, I tasted bitterness, old pain, the memory of her silence during all those humiliations, the memory of her siding with them when I needed someone in my corner. But then I looked at Lila beside me, her calm, her warmth, her belief that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting it meant choosing your peace. I nodded. Thank you for apologizing. I'm not ready to be close again, but maybe someday. Relief washed over her face. She squeezed my shoulder before leaving. Not forgiven, not forgotten, but no longer a weight. It was enough. 2 days after the wedding, an email came in from an address I hadn't seen in years. My father. The subject line, final decision. I didn't open it for hours. Lila and I had been packing for our honeymoon, and I refused to let them poison that space. But eventually, curiosity won. The email was short. They were disowning me, cutting me off legally, removing me from their will, and no longer recognizing me as part of the Tomlinson family. I stared at the words. Then I laughed. Not cruelly, not triumphantly, just freely. I hadn't been part of the Tomlinson family for a long time. They were cutting a string that had frayed and snapped years ago. They just didn't realize it until now. I clicked delete without replying. Lila watched me quietly. You okay? I turned to her, really looking at her, the woman who had rebuilt me, brick by brick. I've never been better, I said. And for once it was undeniably true. We left for our honeymoon the next morning, driving toward the airport with the sun rising behind us. Lila rested her head on my shoulder, humming softly to the radio. The world felt big again, full of possibilities, full of light. I rolled down the window and let the wind hit my face, the part of me that had been mocked the most, and I smiled. Because I finally understood the ugliest part of my life was behind me. And the most beautiful part, the part I chose, the part I built, the part I deserved, was just beginning.